not too optimistic about the possibility of a new grand bargain in Europe, why do you think that political leaders cannot move beyond muddling through?
Well, I think a grand bargain of the sort that Lucas Tsoukalos argues for would be highly desirable, and indeed I think that kind of major development strategy for the South is really necessary. The reason I think it's going to be very difficult to secure is because I think the European economies are uncoupling. They're not as interdependent as they have to be for that to work. That is to say that the southern European countries are facing what could be a decade or 15 years of economic stagnation, but at the same time, Germany and many other countries in the north are beginning to recover economically. So, the basis for a bargain is one which requires the northern European countries to see that their fate is tied to prosperity in the south, to recognize what Jean Monnet called the European Union as a community of fate. But precisely because growth is uncoupling and the north is beginning to grow and the south is still stagnating, that means that the political will to take the major steps necessary for development from the side of the north is really not there. Now, the other indispensable prerequisite here would be an image of how we are interdependent. If you think about the European Union, it's always worked on a principle in which, in the short term, some member states make sacrifices in the interests of an outcome in which all of them gain. A positive sum game, an economist would call it. Well, with the debt crisis, it's much more like a zero-sum game. Some pay, others don't pay, some get paid back, others don't get paid back. So this zero-sum game is a very difficult kind of politics for this sort of movement forward.
And then to add on that, we see that solidarity is lacking both between states in Europe and within states. You know, with equality rising, high levels of unemployment. Is the social contract becoming obsolete in your view?
Well, this is a very disturbing question, I think. I work in the United States, and when European visitors come, they're often very critical of American social policy on the grounds that Americans treat social policy as a form of charity. And by contrast, Europeans see social policy as an expression of social solidarity. Well, unfortunately, I think what we've learned in the course of the Euro crisis is that in Europe, social solidarity stops at national borders. And the initial response to the crisis, which was to treat it as a problem of fiscal fecklessness rather than as an existential crisis for the European Union, has exacerbated that problem, as we all know, with national stereotypes and the like. So I really do think that social solidarity is at a low ebb in the European Union, partly as a result of the response to the crisis. It's very difficult now to redefine the political framework in that context. And as a result, what I worry about is the development of a new dualism in Europe. We know that inside many of the northern European economies, and some in the south as well, there are now dual labor markets, people with pretty secure, pretty well-paid jobs, alongside a labor market of people with precarious jobs, temporary employment. So there's dualism inside the labor markets of Germany and of France and of Italy and of several other countries. Well, what I worry about now is a new dualism in which the north does okay and there are good jobs in the north and all the jobs in the south are precarious. That's the concern.
In your work, you've been very good at highlighting how different varieties of capitalism are at play and how they are incompatible with the single currency. Now, do you think that the monetary union stands a chance in the medium term, given the trade and debt imbalances between North and South and the absence of fiscal transfers?
I think that the euro is likely to continue for quite some time. And I think that's because Germany has decided that it would be more expensive to break up the union than it would be to keep it. And there's certainly commitment still within the citizenry of Southern Europe to remain in the euro, even when people are very unhappy about austerity. So I think the euro will continue for some time. I think the big issue is whether that is going to nonetheless allow for a prosperous Europe. So I think we don't know the answer to that question. I think the big question in my mind is whether there is a viable growth strategy for Southern Europe inside the euro. I ask myself that question every month. I do some research on it. I don't think we know the answer to that. So yes, I think the euro will survive, but the question is how will the different countries and the citizens in those countries prosper inside the euro?
Thank you very much.